Næsta ræða, næsta erindi það hún Ditte Ellersgoord, hún doktorsnemi í læknisfræði í Danmörku og hún ætlar að segja okkur frá stóri rannsókn 522 danskra barna sem gengur út á það að athugað þeirra hagi. Þau eiga það sameiginlegt að eiga foreldra með geðrofasjúkdóma og hún nefndi það áðan við okkur að niðurstöðurnar í rannsókninni eru óbirtar. Þannig að við erum þau fyrstu sem að fá að heyra þær. En velkomin Ditte.
Just find my presentation here. Yes, and thank you for the introduction. I don't know if it was kind or what it was, but I couldn't understand it. But yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yes. And I would also like to start with saying thank you to the organizing committee for being part of this conference. I'm very honored. I think it's a very important conference. Also, I should congratulate you on the qualification for the World Championship in football. We are following that with great interest in Denmark. But actually, I think it's a greater accomplishment that you have made here today, that you have actually gathered more than 400 attendees for a conference in child adolescent psychiatry. I think that brings great hope for the children in Iceland, and yeah, it's really inspiring to see that you can gather so many people. So yeah, okay. And I will talk about a study that I'm part of, the Danish High Risk and Resilience Study, which is a study of 522 7-year-old children with parents who are diagnosed with schizophrenia spectrum disorders, bipolar disorder, and controls. Yes. And I will start to explain a bit about the concept of familial high-risk studies and what knowledge they can contribute with. Then I will move on to presenting the first result from the VIA-7 study, and it is still unpublished data, but it will be published very soon. And then in the end, I will talk a bit about some future perspectives with some new ongoing studies. Okay, so first, why do we conduct a high-risk study? Why have we bothered to collect data for more than 5 years for the Danish high-risk study? Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are both rare events in the general population. But it has been reported that children with a parent with either schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, they have around 10% risk of developing the illnesses themselves. And therefore, these children, they constitute a very important study population for studying the etiology, the risk factors, and the early signs of these two severe mental illnesses. And we hope by studying these children that we will in the future be able to guide primary prevention programs. And of course also another major reason for conducting familial high-risk studies are also to identify if these children and their families have any special needs that we can target for intervention programs. Okay. But what are those children in risk of? A meta-analysis have found that children in familial high risk of severe mental disorder, here also including children of parents with severe depression, have approximately 30% risk of developing a severe mental disorders themselves, and approximately 55% risk of developing any mental illness. So these children, they're not only in risk of inheriting the illness of their parents, but they are actually in risk of a wide range of psychiatric illnesses. Yes, and now I will move on to talk about the VIA-7 study. And in the VIA-7 study, we recruited 522 children, all 7-8 years old, from all over Denmark. And we were able to do that by using the Danish registers. So actually it's quite unique that we have a high-risk study where all of the children are the same age, because it would be hard to locate all of those children if you didn't have the registers. And 202 of those children, they have a parent with a diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum disorder. 120 of the children, they have a parent diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and then there is 200 controls. And the controls are matched to the children in the schizophrenia familial high-risk group on exact age, gender, and also municipality. Okay. Yes. And in the VIA-7, we gathered information on the children from multiple sources. So, of course, we interviewed and we tested the children themselves. We also asked the primary caregiver, which were defined as a person who knew the child best at the time of the assessment. And we tested and interviewed both biological parents. We also asked the school teachers to fill in various rating scales. And we also went on home visits to all of those children. And then, of course, we also asked ourselves, the investigators, who were, of course, blinded, to fill out a rating scale during the assessments to assess problem behavior during the testing. Yeah. Okay. Yes, and VIA-7 includes multiple study domains, where this presentation will show results from some of them. We will look at psychopathology, cognition and motor functioning, but first we'll take a look at the home environment and some parental characteristics. Okay, yes. If we look at the home environment, we see that children in familial high-risk groups, they are more often did not live with both biological parents compared to the controls. And also, children with parents with schizophrenia, they more often lived out of home compared to children of controls. And also, we see that children in the high-risk groups, they often did not live with the parent that was mentally ill. We see that more children in the high-risk group, they lived in single-parent households. And we also saw that the primary caregiver of the children in the high-risk group, they had a lower level of general functioning compared to the children in the control group. So their primary caregiver had a lower level of functioning. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Yes. Sorry. Okay. And then, as I said before, we also went on home visits and we assessed the home environment with the home interview. And what we found there was that, especially in the schizophrenia familial high-risk group, there was a significantly greater proportion of children who had a home environment score in the lower end, meaning that they could have an insufficient home environment. So we were quite concerned about this group. Yes, okay. But then if we look at the index parents, and here the index parents means the ill parent, the parent diagnosed with either schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, or in the control group, the parent who were matched to the ill parent in the schizophrenia high-risk group. If we look at the parents, we see also that generally the parents, the index parents in the high-risk groups, they had lower level of functioning, they were less employed or studying, and for the schizophrenia high-risk index parents, they had a lower level of education. And actually, if we look at the biological co-parent, the parent that was not ill, but was the other parent in the high-risk groups, actually we see a similar pattern where the general level of functioning is lower, they are less employed or studying, and in the schizophrenia high-risk group, they were also less educated. Yes, okay. But now we will move on to what I think is the most interesting thing in the study. It's the psychopathology, which I have been very involved in. And yes, as I said before, we asked the primary caregiver down here to fill in the child behavior checklist. And the child behavior checklist is a checklist assessing 118 problem behaviors at home. And what we found here was, if we look at the bar charts over here, then the dark purple column, that's the schizophrenia familial high-risk children. The light purple is the children in the bipolar high-risk group, and the green bar here is the control group. And as you can see here, we found that children in the high-risk group, they had significantly more problem behavior compared to the controls. And also, if we go down here and we look at the DSM-5 subscales, we also see that here again, the green line represents the controls, and the dark purple represents the schizophrenia high-risk group, and the light purple represent the bipolar high-risk group. And you see here that the schizophrenia high-risk children, they had higher scores on all of the DSM-4 subscales, including affective problems, anxiety problems, somatic problems, ADHD, oppositional defiant problems, and conduct problems. And if we look at the light purple, the children in the bipolar familial high-risk group, we see that they scored higher on all scales except from the ADHD scale. Yes, and as I told you, we also asked the parents to fill in a similar form called the teacher's report form. And the teacher's report form is like the CBCL. It assesses 118 items of problem behavior in the school. And here we see, for the schizophrenia high-risk children, we see a similar pattern. Again, if we look here, we see that both the children in the schizophrenia familial high-risk group and the children in the bipolar familial high-risk group, they scored significantly higher on the TRF total score than the controls did. But if you look down here at the DSM-4 derived subscales, again, we see that if we look at the dark purple here, as you remember, this is the children in the schizophrenia high-risk group. They scored significantly higher on all of the TRF subscales. But if we look at the bipolar high-risk children, they only scored higher than the controls on the anxiety and on the affective and on the somatic subscales. So the teachers, they did not report as many problems in the bipolar high-risk group as did the parents. Okay. And then, as I told you, we also asked ourselves, the researchers down here, to assess problem behavior during the assessments. And we did that with the test observation form, which is a form consisting of 124 items, measuring various problem behavior during the testing. For example, it could be a lack of attention or needing feedback on performance all the time and items like that. And here it's very interesting because if we look up here at the total score, then again we can see that the children in the familial high risk of schizophrenia, they scored significantly higher compared to both the controls but also the bipolar high risk children. And if we look down here at the DSM, sorry, not the DSM-5, but the subscales, then we see a similar pattern where the schizophrenia high risk children, they scored higher on all but the anxiety scale, whereas actually with the bipolar high-risk group, we were not able to find any difference. In what we could see in the test situation, the children in the bipolar high-risk children, they had just the same amount of problem behavior as had the controls. So, yeah. Okay. We also assessed the general level of functioning with the Children's Global Assessment Scale. And here we see a pattern that we have seen many times, that the children in the schizophrenia high-risk group, they had the lowest level of daily function. Then we have the bipolar high-risk children, and then we have the controls. So not only do they have more psychopathology, they also have a lower level of function. Yes, and in conclusion, with regard to the psychopathology, then we had higher mean scores on almost all dimensional psychopathology scale measured by multiple informants in multiple settings with the children in the schizophrenia high-risk group. And in the bipolar high-risk group, we had lower mean scores than children of parents with schizophrenia, but higher mean scores compared with controls of many of the measured scales. Okay. Yes. Now we will move on to the neurocognitive assessments of the YS7 study. And this is an overview of the entire neurocognitive test battery. We have a total of 23 tests. And here you see the domains, the instrument used, and the outcome measures. And I will not go into detail with all of this, don't worry. It's just to give you an overview of how extensive the neurocognitive battery actually was. And before I take you to the results, I will just warn you that the next table is quite busy. The proposal is to give you an overview, and I will then highlight the important details for you. So don't panic when you see the slide. And here we go. Yes. Sorry, I will explain it. So this is the table of the neurocognitive performance of the three groups on the 23 key measures. And compared to the control group, we found lower performance in 14 out of 23 measures in the children of parents with schizophrenia. And that included processing speed, working memory, spatial memory, and verbal fluency. And interestingly, we found no statistical significant differences between the control group and the children of the parents with bipolar disorder. And compared to the children with bipolar disorder, we found lower performance in 8 out of 23 measures of the children in familial high risk of schizophrenia. Okay, so in conclusion with regard to the neurocognition, the results indicate that children at familial high risk for schizophrenia, they demonstrate impairments in numerous but not all cognitive functions in this young age at age 7. And noteworthy, the children in familial high risk of bipolar disorder did not show impairments in any neurocognitive functions compared to control at this age. We couldn't find anything. Okay. And now I will move on to the assessment of the social cognition, the language, and the social functioning. We measured social function, language, and social cognition, and I will have to move on a bit quickly, I think. But what we found was that, again, we see the schizophrenia familial high-risk group. They scored significantly worse on measures of language and on social function. But we did not find anything statistical when we looked at the bipolar high-risk group. Okay, yeah, so we saw language impairments and social functioning impairments in the schizophrenia high-risk group, but not in the bipolar high-risk group. Okay, and then I will move on to the assessment of the children's motor function. And we assess the motor function with the movement assessment battery for children. And the movement test, it is combined of 3 domains. There is the manual dexterity, where the child has to place pegs into a board, has to sew in a board, and has to draw a trail. Then there is the aiming and catching domain, where the child has to throw and catch a ball, and they had to throw a beanbag to a mat. And then there is the balance test, where the child has to stand on one leg on a balance board, and that's actually pretty hard, and you have to show the child how to do it before you give the child a go, so that can be a problem. And then the child also had to hop on one foot, and the child had to walk heel to toe down a line. Okay, and this is the results. And again here, the green line, that represents the controls. We have the dark purple here, that's the schizophrenia high-risk children, and then we have the light purple here, that's the bipolar high-risk children. And again, we see that in the areas of manual dexterity and balance, the children in familial risk of schizophrenia, they scored significantly lower than the controls. We did not find any significant results with the bipolar disorders. Yes, okay. And another way of showing this is that per the movement ABC manual, then definite motor problem is if the child is at the 5 percentile or lower. And if we look again at the children, then we can see that the children in the schizophrenia high-risk group, they had about double the risk of having definite motor problems compared with controls. And we didn't find anything for the bipolar high-risk group. Okay, yeah, so the children in risk of schizophrenia, they had deficits in manual dexterity and balance and higher risk of definite motor problems, and we did not find anything in the children at bipolar high risk. Okay, so in conclusion, if we look at all of those results from the VIA-7 together, then we see that especially the group of children in familial risk of schizophrenia, they had poor home environment, came from families with lower socioeconomic status, showed higher levels of psychopathology and lower performance in some measures of cognition and motor functioning. So we hope that these children, they have a lot of resilience factors and that we can be able to identify them, so that they will meet the challenges of life like this boy do. And here, of course, it's also important to mention that all of those results, they are on group level, and that some high-risk families and high-risk children, they actually did very well. And of course, we want to identify why do these children and these families do so well. Yeah, so that will be the next step. Okay, but all of those results, they makes us wonder, what can we do to help these children? And the first thing we will do is that we are right now following up the children once more. They have turned 11, some of them, and we see them, they come in. It's very nice. Actually, some of them they're actually taller than me now. Yes. And besides the follow-up on a lot of measures from the VIA-7, we will also include MRI scan and measures of physical activity, sleep, and use of social media. Okay, so this is the VIA-11. We plan to follow them up for actually more follow-ups, but that will depend on funding. Yeah, okay, and then the preventive perspectives, because can we do something for these children? And a new project that has just begun is the VIA Family project, which is an integrated, specialized, non-stigmatizing, which is very important, flexible and tailor-made intervention for families with children having parents diagnosed with severe mental illness. And it's a collaboration between child and adolescent psychiatry, adult psychiatry, and the social service. And that's a quite unique collaboration in a Danish setting. We don't really talk together normally. So, yeah, that's quite unique. And also, it will be, we'll have it will be a multidisciplinary team taking care of these families, so that we have a child and adolescent psychiatrist, a child psychologist, we'll have a psychiatric nurse, a social worker, and a family counselor. And every family will have a case manager, and it will be 18 months of intervention, and it's a randomized control study, so we also have a control group. Okay. Yes, and the basic elements of Via Family will be psychoeducation for all family members. It will be parental training with the Triple P program. It will be a case manager. Oh, I know. Child psychiatric treatment. We will ease the access to get child psychiatric treatment for the children. And then there is the supplementary elements if the family need it, or if they are accepted, of course. We will make out a safety plan for them. We'll help the parents to have treatment optimization for their own illness. We will help them seek financial or practical support. And we will communicate with the schools and the daycares if the parents want us to. Okay, that's the Triple P. And the primary outcome measures will be the daily level of functioning in the child, the child's psychopathology, absence from school, and family function, users' quality of life, and users' satisfaction. Okay, so with this we hope to enhance the resilience of these children and the families. That's the goal. Okay. Yeah, so the take-home message is that children born to parents with severe mental disorders, especially schizophrenia, they are vulnerable due to a wide range of risk factors. Many of them can be identified at age 7 or maybe even earlier. We haven't measured that. Families with severe mental illness normally do not get any specific help for their children or their family life in Denmark. And we think it's time to start on early preventive interventions to reduce stress and enhance resilience in these families. Via Family is an attempt to do so, and meanwhile we will follow up the high-risk cohort. Okay, and I would just like to thank all of our 522 children and their families who participated. It has been such a joy to meet the families. I've had a lot of homemade cake and a lot of very interesting discussions. It has really been a joy. If you haven't made a high-risk study in Iceland, you should do it immediately. It's really a nice time you have with these families. Okay, yeah, and this is the collaborators. So thank you.